In 2018, the United States and China began the most consequential trade war in modern history. Tariffs, sanctions, supply chain rewiring, companies moving factories out of China overnight, decades of globalization quietly being dismantled. Most analysts called it a political dispute. They were wrong. It was something older, something that has happened before, something that always ends the same way. 600 years ago, the most sophisticated trade network the world had ever built connected China to Rome, moved silk and spices across 10,000 miles, and created wealth on a scale that made the cities along its routes the richest places on Earth. Then it vanished, not slowly, not gradually, almost overnight. And the cities that depended on it most, the ones that had grown fat and powerful on the assumption that the network would last forever, they didn't just lose their wealth, they disappeared from history entirely. To understand what the Silk Road actually was, you need to forget the romantic image of camel caravans crossing desert dunes. It was much more than that. The Silk Road was the internet of the ancient world, a living network of trade routes, financial instruments, diplomatic relations, and shared institutions that connected the Mediterranean to China across Central Asia, the Indian Ocean, and the Persian Gulf. At its peak under the Mongol Empire in the 13th century, what historians call the Pax Mongolica, a merchant could travel from Venice to Beijing with a single letter of credit, a piece of paper, backed by the Mongol imperial guarantee. Think about what that means. No currency conversion, no confiscation at borders, no competing tariffs. One network, one guarantee. Seamless commerce across the largest contiguous land empire in history. Sound familiar? Today, we call that the dollar system and the WTO framework, a single reserve currency and a shared set of trade rules that allow a manufacturer in Vietnam to sell to a retailer in Germany without a diplomatic negotiation at every border. The mechanics are different. The function is identical. And like every network built on a single guarantee, it worked brilliantly right up until the moment the guarantee failed. The cities along the Silk Road didn't just trade, they specialized. Samarkand became the world center for paper production. Kashgar dominated the jade trade. Hormuz controlled the Persian Gulf maritime routes. Tabriz was the clearinghouse for east-west luxury goods. Each city carved out a niche so specific, so profitable, and so dependent on the continued functioning of the network that they forgot how to do anything else. This is what economists call comparative advantage taken to its logical extreme. Today, we have the same architecture. Taiwan produces 90% of the world's advanced semiconductors. The Democratic Republic of Congo produces 70% of the world's cobalt. Saudi Arabia controls a disproportionate share of global oil reserves. Rotterdam processes 40% of Europe's container traffic. Each node is extraordinarily productive. Each node is extraordinarily exposed. The Silk Road cities didn't see their specialization as vulnerability. They saw it as strength. Their unique position in the network was their competitive advantage, their source of wealth, their identity. Until the network stopped flowing. Then their specialization, the thing that made them rich, became the thing that made their collapse total and irreversible. The Silk Road didn't collapse because of one event. It collapsed because three separate shocks arrived within a single generation. The first shock was biological. In 1346, plague arrived at the Silk Road city of Kaffa on the Black Sea. Within 2 years, it had traveled every major trade route in the network. By 1353, it had killed between 30 and 60% of Europe's population and comparable numbers across Central Asia and China. The Black Death didn't just kill people, it killed the human infrastructure of the network, the merchants who knew the routes, the translators who bridged languages, the bankers who understood the credit instruments, the knowledge embedded in human relationships, irreplaceable, unrecoverable. The second shock was political. The Mongol Empire, the single political entity whose Pax Mongolica had guaranteed the safety of the routes, fragmented into competing successor states. The unified guarantee disappeared. Every border became a negotiation, every crossing became a risk. The third shock was technological. Portuguese navigators found a sea route to Asia around Africa. Suddenly, the entire overland network, thousands of miles of desert and mountain and political complexity, was bypassed by ships that could carry more cargo more cheaply with fewer intermediaries. Now, consider our moment: pandemic, geopolitical fragmentation, technological disruption. Three shocks, same sequence, different century. I need to stop here for a second and say something. I know this is a small channel, you can see that, and the fact that you're here, watching this, giving this video a chance, that alone tells me I'm on the right track. If you're enjoying this series, a like, a comment, even just finishing the video, it means more than you'd think. And if you have an idea for what the next topic should be, drop it in the comments. I read everything. If something isn't working, the pacing, the topic, anything, tell me in the comments or the community tab. I'd genuinely rather know. Your input shapes where this channel goes, so thank you for being here. Now let's get back to it. Here is what makes the Silk Road collapse different from most economic disasters. The cities that depended on it didn't just go through a recession, they ceased to exist as significant population centers for centuries. Samarkand shrank from a metropolis of hundreds of thousands to a small regional town. Merv, once one of the largest cities in the world, was so thoroughly destroyed during the Mongol conquests that its ruins weren't fully excavated until the 20th century. Ctesiphon, the great Silk Road hub that had been one of the world's largest cities for 600 years, simply disappeared. When a network collapses, it doesn't take the strong nodes with it first, it takes the most specialized ones. The cities that had built their entire identity around a single function in a single network had no fallback, no alternative, no plan B. Compare that to the cities that survived. Venice redirected its trading networks towards the Atlantic. Genoa pivoted to financial services. Cities with multiple trading partners and multiple transferable skills adapted. Now, apply that logic to the modern economy. When the global trading system restructures, and it is restructuring, the most specialized nodes will feel it first and hardest. The most diversified will adapt. This is not a prediction. It is a pattern, documented through 600 years of Silk Road history. The Silk Road collapse didn't end global trade, it redirected it. And the people who understood that redirection was coming, who positioned themselves for the next network rather than defending their position in the old network, they didn't just survive, they built the foundations of the modern world. The Portuguese crown invested in navigation technology decades before the Silk Road's final collapse, not because they knew exactly when the overland routes would fail, but because they understood that dependence on a single pathway was an existential risk. The result was the age of discovery: new routes, new networks, new nodes of wealth. The merchants of Venice who lost the Silk Road trade didn't simply disappear. The most adaptable among them moved their capital, their skills, and their networks into banking and finance, industries that required no specific geography and no single trade route to function. They took what was transferable and abandoned what wasn't. The lesson isn't that you can predict which network will collapse or when. The lesson is that the survivors are never the ones who defended their position in the old network longest. They are the ones who started building in the new one earliest. Today, the global trading system is being redesigned in real time. New shipping routes through the Arctic, nearshoring and friendshoring replacing the old China-centric supply chains, digital trade infrastructure reducing the importance of physical geography. The question isn't whether you believe the old network will hold. The question is whether you're building anything in the new one. The Silk Road lasted for over 1,000 years. It connected civilizations that had never met. It moved ideas, religions, technologies, and diseases alongside silk and spices. It created the first truly global economy, fragile, magnificent, and ultimately mortal. When it ended, the world didn't stop trading. It found new routes, built new networks, created new centers of wealth in places the old network had never reached. That is always what happens. The network doesn't end, it shifts. The question the Silk Road collapse leaves us with is the same question the Bronze Age collapse and the Roman debasement left us with. When the shift comes, and it always comes, are you positioned in what is dying or what is being born? The Silk Road cities that thrived for centuries asked the wrong question. They asked, how do we protect what we have? The survivors asked a different one. What comes next, and how do we get there first? In the next video, we look at the first financial bubble in recorded history, a single flower, a single market, and a collapse so complete and so sudden that it became the template for every speculative mania that followed. The Dutch tulip crash. See you there.